There is updated information coming out of San Diego regarding that citation crash that took the life of 6 people. So we're going to take a look at a local news story that gives us some shocking details about what happened that night, and these are new details. I'm also going to give you a correction to the last video, and then we're going to talk about a mitigating factor that is so important and nobody else is talking about it. So hang out all the way to the end. Let's watch the news.
The pilot did not report any problems to air traffic control, and he did not declare an emergency.
During a news briefing this afternoon, NTSB investigator Dan Baker said the weather notification system was not working at Montgomery Field.
Okay, so there's 2 bits of information now that this news reporter has given you. Number one, from the NTSB reporter, that the airplane, there was nothing wrong with it. It was a completely intact airplane. There was no emergency declared. And then the weather service was not reporting. Now, we all know that already, but it was reporting at other area airports, just not this one. So there was no local altimeter setting, and there was no updated or weather at all given for Montgomery Airport.
When the pilot was making an approach around 3:45 a.m. on Thursday. Additionally, the approach lights at the runway that a pilot is supposed to be able to activate remotely have not been working at Montgomery Field since October, according to public records.
Okay, so I want to stop it right there and talk about the NOTAM. There's a notice to airmen that was published about the rails being out. That's the runway alignment intensity lights. And those are, generally speaking, lead-in lights to the runway. The runway edge lights are different. And my experience with pilot-controlled lighting, where you click on a frequency to up the intensity of the lights, those always mean edge lights. Now, I've never been at an airport where you had pilot-controlled lighting that controlled the lead-in lights. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't exist. I've just never had that as part of my personal experience. I want to hear in the comments from you pilots out there. Have you been at an airport where the lead-in lights and the edge lights are all on the same frequency? All we know from the NOTAM is that the lead-in lights were not working. It doesn't say anything about the edge lights. Now, if they were one and the same at this airport, then none of them were working. But it's possible that the pilot was clicking away trying to get the edge lights to come up, and he did, but the lead-in lights didn't work. At any rate, this reporter is kind of confusing the 2 things. And I stopped the video right there because I want you to look at that piece of debris on the road. That's just downstream from the wire that got clipped by the airplane. And look at what a huge piece of the airplane came off. That looks like a wing to me. It's hard to say from this distance what it is, but it's either a horizontal vertical stabilizer or one of the wings. The point is, if something that large comes off your airplane, it's probably not flying anymore. And that's the case here.
There were notices to the airmen stating that there was airport lighting that was out that would have affected the illumination of the runway.
Conditions were foggy that night, perhaps with less than a half-mile visibility. The NTSB confirms the pilot did try to activate the approach lights as he descended by keying his radio microphone several times.
All right, that doesn't sound great, but we'll give it a go.
That's when the plane hit power lines about 2 miles away from the runway and crashed into the Murphy Canyon Military Housing Complex in Tierra Santa. The NTSB says the preliminary report should be out in a couple weeks. The final report could take up to 2 years. In Tierra Santa, David Gottfredson, CBS 8.
Okay, so I think this reporter was confusing those lead-in lights with the actual runway edge lights. The NTSB guy was careful to say approach lights. And I don't know if you know for sure, let me know in the comments if at that particular airport they are one and the same. I think of them as separate lighting systems, but they might be one and the same. Now, having said that, that to me is a huge big deal, an update on that crash into San Diego, the lighting. There's more to come, however. Let me make a correction before we do that. And I want to thank all of you who made comments. We do read them and great feedback. And I get educated in this thing as well as you do. That's what I like about doing this channel is it keeps me sharp. And when I hear back from you, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that before. And I heard from a lot of citation pilots. Now, remember, I'm not a citation pilot, all right? I fly a 777. And so before I go and comment on an airplane I've never flown and don't know the first thing about, I try to go look up as much information as I possibly can. It's not an exact science for sure. But many of you said a Cessna citation, especially a 550, is not a Category C aircraft, as I had said in the video. And under Category C, it said the approach was not authorized. It's a Cat B aircraft, and the approach was authorized. Being authorized means you have to fly the approach as published. That is a different issue, but whether he was legal or not to do it, apparently he was legal. But let me show you where I got that information, all right? It was off the internet, and the internet has messed up good old Captain Steeeve once again. Oh, you can't rely on the internet anymore for anything. When I looked up Cessna Citation approach speeds, here's what I got, 140 knots. It says it right there. The approach speed for a Cessna Citation is 140 knots, which clearly puts it in the Cat C category. I've heard from a bunch of you, several of you dedicated entire videos to correcting me. Thank you so much for that. It's a Cat B aircraft, so he was authorized to shoot the approach. Now, having said that, you can't go down and take a look-see, right? That mentality of let's give it a go means you have to stay on the glide path as you're coming down. And when you get down to your missed approach altitude, if you see any of the runway environment, you're cleared to descend below now and continuing down to the runway. If you don't see any of the runway environment, you've got to do a go-around. You can't do a dive and drive. Why? Because those approaches are built with a certain glide path so that you don't run into obstacles along the way, especially in this part of the country. There's ridges and little hills and mountains, and on top of that was a power line, and this guy ran into one of those power lines. We'll be right back, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. Recently, we did a deep dive into the radar and radio outages at Newark. And anytime we're reporting on something this complex with safety concerns, infrastructure issues, and FAA decisions all in the mix, it's critical that we look at a variety of sources to make sure we're getting the full picture. That's why we're so thankful for today's sponsor, Ground News. Ground News is the news comparison platform that helped us immediately understand how this story was being covered. We saw that there were 84 stories in total, with the majority coming from outlets in the political center, 9 from the left and 12 from the right. One of the features I personally love is their bias breakdown. With the Newark coverage, for example, outlets on the left focused on underfunding and outdated systems, while outlets on the right use words like terrifying, pointing to government mismanagement. Seeing those differences helps us understand not just what happened, but how it's being framed. Other helpful tools are the factuality feature to check the reliability of outlets reporting on it, and their location of coverage tool to see how different countries were or weren't talking about it. Here on the channel, we don't want to repeat just one side of the story. We want to understand all sides, sort through the noise, and bring you our take, grounded in the facts. Ground News helps us do that. And right now, they're offering 40% off the Vantage plan. Just scan the QR code on screen or use the link down in the description. We live in a time of polarization, but Ground News helps us to cut through the noise and understand what's happening in the news. Thanks to Ground News for sponsoring this video. It really helps us to make content for you. Now, what is the factor that I think everybody else has missed in this crash? And I think it's hugely important. And I'm going to start this out by saying, if any of you know Secretary Duffy or you know the head of the FAA, I want you to send this video to them, because as a 40-plus year pilot, I am so frustrated by what I'm going to show you next. And what is that? It's how weather is not just broadcast, but how it's delivered to pilots, the format in which it is given to us. It is given to us in cryptic abbreviations and overtones that it's very difficult to understand what exactly you're reading. Now you would think, wait a minute, shouldn't weather be clear and written in plain English? Yeah, it should be, but it's not. And it's been like this forever. Now, some of you might have the history and go back 80 years ago, they had to do it that way because, well, that's great. But you know what? It's 2025. We're well into the 21st century. There's no reason that we have to do it the way it was done 80 years ago. And while we're updating this air traffic control system, let's update how we forecast weather to pilots. Here's the first thing. At my airline, there are approved surface weather formats, and there are 7 of them, 7 different weather services that broadcast the weather. This is not a comprehensive list. There are many more than this. These are just the approved ones at my airline, and all of them are difficult to find. They're all convoluted to read, and they all have a different format and a different layout, and you have to be educated in all of them, and it's just simply not possible. So 7 different ways to get the weather. Then there are pages in my iPad that explain what the different abbreviations are that I get. Now watch this. Sky, SK, all right, that's pretty easy to understand. FEW, that stands for few. That's just spelled out, the whole word. All right, now you get down to things like overcast, they do OVC. So far, pretty easy to follow along. SCT means scattered, all right, not too hard. Towering cumulus, TCU. Cumulus nimbus, CB. Now we get into the V's, right? Vertical visibility. If I see VV, that tells me vertical visibility. But wait a minute, what if I see a V someplace else in the weather? It might not mean vertical visibility. It might mean variable. It might mean visibility. I don't know. I just see the letter V. I don't know if it means vertical visibility, just visibility, or if it means variable. And it could be all sorts of different things in the various 7 different formats that I read. And so you say, well, why do they abbreviate it? Why don't they just write out the word visibility? Good question. Why don't we just write out the word visibility? This pilot coming into this airport that night didn't have weather forecast or broadcasting from that particular airport. The system was down, all right? For whatever reason, it was down that night. And so he's gathering weather from adjacent airports, trying to get an idea of what the weather looks like at his airport. He didn't have a local altimeter setting, he didn't have a ceiling, and he didn't have a visibility. 3 good reasons to go someplace else that has a reporting weather system where you're legal to fly that approach, or at least you know what the weather is before you fly the approach. Now, there are charts that explain what the different abbreviations mean. All right, DR. You might think DR means drizzle. Now, a lot of you made fun of me on the last video because I called BR baby rain, and that's my way to remember mist. I know baby rain means mist, but BR, how does that translate to mist? And what's the difference between mist and drizzle and light rain? I don't know. It just is. And so DR, no, it doesn't mean drizzle. It means drifting. It has to do with snow. Well, then what's drizzle? Drizzle is DZ. Oh, okay. So, that wouldn't be confusing at all. Now, what is hail? Hail is GR. Excuse me? GR for hail? Why isn't it HL or HA? Why do we have to abbreviate it? It's only 4 letters. Mist is only 4 letters. Why can't we just write it out? All right, GS, what's that? Snow pellets. SP was being used for something else? Yes, it was. Strato something or another, right? It's some type of stratus cloud, right? That's the extent of my memory on that. All right, DU stands for widespread dust. That's not to be confused with DS, which is a dust storm. Or FG, that means fog. Hey, that's easy. I can remember that one. All right, now let me show you a printout. And this will be crystal clear to you after we're done. I was coming back yesterday from London, and I bring up all the area weather in Canada in case I have to use one of those airports as a alternate. And the first little bit of information I get at the top is what weather service is forecasting this. This is a METAR, different than a TAF. And remember those 7 different reports? This is one of those, and it's a METAR report. At the top of each airport, I get the 4-letter identifier for the airport. Now, you would think an airport like St. John would have a J in it, correct? No, it doesn't have a J anywhere in the 4 letters. It's YYT. Okay, I just have to know that. You'd think a place like Stevensville would have an S in it. No, it doesn't have an S in it. Maybe Halifax has an H in it. Oh, it does. It does have an H in it. There's no rhyme or reason to why they came up with these 4 letters. You just have to memorize them. Why in the world, after those 4 letters, can't they just say St. John, Stevensville, Goose, Gander? It would take all the guesswork out of it for the pilots who are busy flying the airplane. All right, after that, then, we begin to get the winds. And the winds now are listed 040 at 14, gusting to 19. KT means knots. The next is now the visibility, 1 1/2 SMs. That's statute miles. Why can't they write out statute miles? Who knows? The next is minus sign RA. What does that mean? That means light rain. If it's plus sign, it's heavy rain. RA is easy to remember. Then the famous BR that you all like out there, which stands for mist. I just remembered as baby rain. Why they came up with that abbreviation, I don't know. And now I start to get my cloud cover layers, and that's the next in this particular format. Other formats, it's not necessarily there. So overcast at 004, I am trained to add 2 zeros to the end of the last number. So that tells me it's overcast at 400 feet. Why do they put 2 zeros in front of it? Your guess is as good as mine. But it's 400 feet. Next is the temperature and the dew point, and they're always separated by a slash. And if there's no difference between the two, in this case it's 4 and 4, that tells me there's a high likelihood that there's going to be fog. Not necessarily, but a higher than normal likelihood that there's going to be fog at that airport. Next is the letter A, followed by 4 numbers. That's the altimeter setting. If you're over in Europe, it's a Q for QNH. Over here, it's altimeter. And then there's RMK, and that's the remarks section. And I've got, over here, I've got fog, 4. Let me get down to the next line for Halifax. Here's an interesting remark. SF1, SF8. SF1, all right, means stratofractus. We throw in a little, I guess, Wile E. Coyote lingo here, or a little Latin lingo. And the intensity is 1. Stratofractus at 8 as well. That's, again, an intensity level. Then there's just stratofractus. And then after that is the letters T and R, TR. Now, my first officer and I, we spent an hour and a half on our last flight looking through our iPads, trying to figure out what TR stood for. It doesn't stand for thunderstorms. It doesn't stand for terminal area. My best guess was it stood for Tyrannosaurus Rex. I think there was a Tyrannosaurus Rex sighting at this airport, and that's what they put a TR down for. Now, if you know for sure what TR means, even if you don't, you want to make a guess, let me hear it in the comments, because it took me an hour and a half. I still don't know what TR stands for. The point is this. There are the way that weather, an important thing, like weather, is transmitted to the pilots is archaic. It's just like that out-of-date air traffic control system we have. It needs to be updated. And so, my friends, as we're updating the system, we need to update into plain English how weather is transmitted. And you say, well, why English? You know, what if you don't speak English? You know what? English is the international language of aviation. And so everybody has to be English proficient. But you know what? It's just a button push away to translate it into your own language, French or Spanish or Russian, whatever you want. You know what? We've got the technology these days to make it simple, to make it understandable. And so that in a crash like San Diego, was the way the weather is transmitted and broadcast to the pilot, was that a factor? It was one of the factors, because he was hunting around for weather, and he doesn't have the time as a single pilot of this airplane after a long night's journey to go through and try to figure out what all these abbreviations are. It should be easy to read and interpret, so he doesn't have to go through that mental gymnastics on top of everything else. There's no reason for this. And it's a mitigating factor, I think, in that crash where 6 people lost their lives in San Diego, and there's no reason for it. Time to get the system into the 21st century. Now you know. I'm Captain Steve. Fly safe.